Thank you for listening to this video. So today we're going to talk about Agile Scrum as we use it at Clear Insight. We're going to go through an Agile overview, what it is. We'll talk about the team and different roles that are important, some patterns that we use, as well as the Kunagi tool itself, which is our collaboration tool for how we use Agile Scrum. There's some follow-up items we can discuss, some frequently asked questions, and some exercises that folks can do later on their own. So first, let's talk about the overview. So Agile really starts with a set of key principles. So we want teams to be self-organized. We want them to have openness. They're going to be focused around deliverables. There's commitment to getting things done. There's courage among the team to be honest with each other. We're respectful. We're not about putting each other down. We're only going to be successful together as a team. There's visibility. We can see into what each other is doing, and we're open and honest and transparent with that. Try to have some fun while we're doing this. It doesn't need to be serious all the time. We're considerate of each other with a team approach. We're focused around efficiency. Everyone pulls their own weight. We learn from each other, and decisions are really made around, with rationality and logic. So starting with these principles, we build on that. We want to talk about the definition of done. So when we say something is done, that can mean different things to different people. Maybe there's documentation required. What type of documentation is required? Maybe there's testing. How much testing? What type? Who does the testing? What feedback do we need? So all of these go into a definition of done for something. If you think of an example, anytime you ask someone to do something, oftentimes they come back and they say it's done, but you'd argue that it's not done because the definition wasn't clear. So the definition of done for every particular feature is an important piece for us to agree upon at the beginning. Story points are how we estimate things. For the purposes of starting a project, story points are typically a day of effort. But over time, it helps us get an idea of what things are bigger or smaller than stuff we've done before. For Agile and our flavor of it, we really want to have tight feedback loops. We don't want to go off and build something and then 6 months later get feedback on it. Every 2 weeks, if a sprint is 2 weeks long, every 2 weeks we get feedback on what we've done. Ideally, then we can stop at any time. Sometimes there's external decisions or external events that affect the project. We have no control over it, but it could impact timelines. So we want to make sure that we can stop any time. And the tool is not the process. By this, I mean we're going to use a tool called Kunagi for our Agile Scrum approach. Kunagi it doesn't absolutely need to be used on every project. If the team decides that there's a better way of doing something, that's fine. This is just the tool that we choose to use for our projects, and typically we always start with it, but then if it makes sense to change things over time, that's fine too. So next I want to talk about the team, and these are some roles that are important on every project. So there's going to be the product owner. This is the person who's responsible for setting external expectations. They're the single point of contact for external people, and they're answering business questions. They're the ones that they plan releases, they are responsible for product success, and they're setting priorities. So really the product owner is the key decision maker on the business side. So they're the person that has a vision for what this tool is going to help people achieve. And by having one particular person as the product owner, it helps be clear that who's setting the direction for this. Now another role is the Scrum Master. This person's all about coaching people on the process, removing roadblocks, and protecting the team. So this person is not necessarily the project manager, but they're helping people across the team. If someone's stuck on something and they don't know who to go to, Scrum Master is always the first person to go to. Now, the last role is a team member, and really everyone else is a team member, and we're all focused on actioning around priorities. The priorities are set by the product owner. The Scrum Master facilitates helping people get what they need to move forward. And as a team member, we're always actioning around priorities. So you may hear me talk about product owner, Scrum Master, and team member, and these are the roles that we're focused on with Agile Scrum. So the next piece are patterns. Now, this is where we're going to differ from a waterfall approach. Sometimes you'll hear Agile or Scrum compared to a traditional waterfall approach. And waterfall is something that's very common for construction projects. You know, in a traditional waterfall approach, you'll have planning, design, construction or development, testing, integration, and so on. So there are very defined phases as part of a waterfall project where when you're finished one, you move on to the next. And this works well for construction and a lot of other industries where you want to have a clear plan that does not change. Now, when it comes to building software, an iterative approach sometimes makes more sense. And what this facilitates is time blocks. We can say we're going to work on this for a certain block of time, say 2 weeks. After those 2 weeks, we're going to come back and ask for feedback. What's gone well? What hasn't gone so well? What do we want to change? We can do a prioritization every 2 weeks. Maybe something has changed in the world so that our priorities have changed than 2 weeks ago. Maybe we need to stop for some particular reason. Maybe resources are being pulled away from the project. Maybe there's something else going on that we need to stop temporarily or even permanently because there's some kind of strategic change that's affected us. We want to continuously deliver functionality so folks can use something. We don't want to wait a year before we release anything because after a year maybe what we were originally planning to build is not useful anymore. And here we want to manage scope rather than time. So by that, if we think of a visual, there's the visual of the iron triangle here. And what this tells us is that when we look at, if you imagine a project as a triangle, you've got resources being cost or budget, you've got scope being features and functionality, and you've got schedule, which is our time. If you pull on any one of these three corners, then you're taking something away. If you're making it smaller, you're taking a quality. Yeah, but what this is trying to illustrate is that changing any one of these four pieces affects the other three. Changing resources, scope, quality, or schedule does impact the other three. So it's something to be conscious of. And with this approach, we can be conscious of that and make the right decisions after each sprint, after every 2 weeks. So we've kind of talked about how it is compared to a waterfall approach, but let's go into a little more detail on the patterns for this approach. When I think of a release, I think of it as a group of sprints. Now a sprint itself, we're going to go through a couple different pieces here. I'll explain what a release is, I'll explain what a sprint is, but I'm going to start with the product backlog. So the product backlog are really the stories or what we need to do. So here's a typical example. As a role, I want to do some action so that there's some benefit. So who is this helping? What are they trying to do? And why are they trying to do it? And a story here is not, it's a fairly granular piece. It's, I want to run this report so that I can see whether or not my team is being successful in the past month so that I can implement change to make sure next month is better. So it's down to like a one report, one template, one small feature that we can test independently, and one small feature that ideally is something we can demonstrate, and then something we can promote to production and that folks can use. So as we build our list of stories, which is what the product backlog is, we need someone to prioritize and clarify the product backlog. We want to know, does this story have enough information to be executed? How would we test it? How do we know when it's done? And this one here goes back to the definition of done. So we have to identify what is our definition of done for each of these stories. What are the acceptance criteria for this one item? All of this is done before we've written any code. So when we're filling out the detail for a story, we have this level of detail in the story already. So as we build out the product backlog, we start choosing stories to go into a sprint. Now, keep in mind when I say sprint, we're thinking about a time-boxed 2 weeks. Now you can change the time box, but for the sake of our discussion today, let's assume that one sprint is 2 weeks. So we start by having a sprint planning session. The team sits down with the product owner. The product owner says, these are the top 10 stories we have on the product backlog. These are the most important ones to me. I would like these ones to be done. The team gets a chance to say, they ask questions. What about any kind of holes that they may see in the story? The team can also push back and say, that we can't action this particular story because there's not sufficient detail. There's a piece missing. So at the sprint planning session, the team gets to select which stories from the top of the product backlog they're comfortable actioning on this next sprint. Once those are selected for the sprint, we have Scrum meetings every couple of days. So it's usually just 3 to 6 people. It's only the team members. It's not a blaming meeting, and it's a safe environment. And we're limited to 10 minutes maximum. And all we do is we go through 3 simple questions. What did we do since last time? What am I doing today? Do I have any roadblocks? So each person on the call answers those 3 questions, and the call ends. It's not an opportunity to catch up on our weekend, socialize, or anything like that. Because there could be several people on the call, we make sure this is a very quick call so that everyone can get back to their day. At the end of a sprint, when we've completed all the stories, we have a sprint review meeting, also called a demo. It's not a victory lap. This is an opportunity for the team to demonstrate what they've accomplished, and we're looking for feedback. Stakeholders get to ask questions, they make notes, and it's an interactive session where we get the feedback we may need to move forward and possibly adjust priorities. Sometimes as towards the end of that session, the team itself, without the stakeholders, has an open and honest conversation about what went well, not so well, and what they want to change within that one particular sprint. So every sprint, we have this quick retrospective so that we can improve at each sprint. So
just a quick question here. So you mentioned a timeline of 2 weeks for a sprint. So is this mostly dividing the project up into time blocks as opposed to a task-orientated block?
Very good question. That's exactly right. So the project's divided into releases, which are sets of sprints, and each sprint has stories from the backlog. So if you think about it compared to a traditional waterfall model, sometimes you could think of releases as milestones. There's a particular milestone that folks are working towards. That milestone is broken up into phases, and then there's features. Now the reason for the different words here is the product backlog is always our list of current priorities. It's not part of a project plan at the beginning that's set in stone. This is something that does change or can change every 2 weeks. And every 2 weeks at the sprint planning session, the team with the product owner decides what stories are going to get done in this particular sprint, all around the vision of completing a particular release. So sometimes towards the end of a release, we'll have one extra sprint where we just do some additional UAT, we update some documentation, work with any external groups to do whatever other stuff is needed. Sometimes marketing, sometimes training, but making sure that we're going to deliver this particular release. And another difference between this approach and the waterfall is a milestone is with respect to scope. So typically there's you have to complete a certain piece before you can say a milestone is done. Whereas a release is up to the product owner to decide when the release is ready to go. So maybe if we do one sprint, say we do 2 sprints, and the product owner says, you know what, that's enough for a release. We're going to release that out to users so that they can use it. And then we work on another release, maybe more detailed pieces that we're expanding upon. But the product owner gets to decide when this is ready for a release to users. So we've talked about a quick overview of Agile. We've talked about the team. We've talked about patterns. Now we're going to look at more at Kunagi itself. So this is the tool that we use to implement these patterns and this approach. So just as a word, Kunagi just means done in Japanese. And the reason they chose that is that the tool, the approach, and the team should all be focused around getting things done. Making sure we know what done means and making sure that we are getting things done. The product backlog are the stories that may or may not be actioned in future sprints. We have an issues list that captures we enter all feedback, bugs, ideas, comments here first. Then we decide what's a bug and what's an idea, and we manage those pieces. We have releases, and a release can be a date. So oftentimes it's important to say, we have a date that we need to release things by. It could be for a budgeting cycle, it could be for an annual report, it could be for any number of pieces that are really tied to a date rather than scope. So the product owner gets to decide, if we're working towards a particular date to have things done, the product owner is always deciding what stories do we want to have in there before this particular release as a date. But a release is usually a set of sprints, which are with a sprint backlog, which are stories committed to in the sprint. Around project, and these are all tabs within Kunagi we'll go through in a moment, but I just want to show them kind of on an abstract level first. So impediments are items that are blocking someone from getting something done. By creating an impediment, it's very visible to the entire team that someone's stuck on something and need help. Risks are just the same as in a traditional project. There are things that are outside of our control, but if they were to happen, we want to have a plan around mitigating their impact to this particular project. A journal is just kind of a running list of things that have happened within the project, and blog entries are a handy way of creating notes that are available to everyone on the team, particularly for meeting minutes and anything that we need to make sure we're capturing as the project continues. The sprint itself has a whiteboard that gives us tasks and current status in the current sprint. Collaboration, we have a wiki. Typically we start with a story template, gives folks an idea of what we would like to see in every story. Forums list any comments across the system. There's a calendar tool that gives us the sprint dates. Anyone can put in their times for vacation or out of office, times for demos and meetings and such, and a file repository. So throughout the system we can upload files. Typically these are Word documents or Excel documents that are relative to a particular comment or story, and they're always available here in this list, but they're also available through links wherever they need to be used. And then settings, if folks want to, as they're learning the product, I recommend going to settings, personal preferences, and email notifications. You can turn on email notifications so it'll send you an email when anything changes, and it'll give you a note around what changed. And lastly, the dashboard gives you an overview of the project at a glance. So we've talked a lot about Kunagi, but now we're going to flip into it to see what this looks like in action. So here we are, we're looking at our test project. We're looking at the dashboard. So on this screen here, we see our sprint burn down chart. For a particular sprint, we'll see how much effort we committed to at the very beginning. And the gray line gives us an idea of what our ideal trend would be. Saturday, Sunday are not typically work days, so there's no progress on weekends, but we want to see that how we're tracking against this ideal. If we have something that looks like this, so we had a sprint where there was only 1 hour of effort and it's completed the first day, that's fantastic. Probably could have committed to more, but this as an example, we want this line to be below the trend line. If it's trending above, that's a signal that maybe someone's not updating something, or there's something else happening on the system that we need to be conscious of. So let's look at the sprint backlog. So on the left-hand side under product, you'll see, product backlog. This is a list of all the stories that we have in the system right now. For each of the stories, we can click on them to get some detail. Ideally, there's a description of what this thing is. The themes are a nice way of grouping different pieces together, so we can then filter on just a particular theme. qualities can be added in here. Maybe for a particular story, we want to make sure we have feature documentation. We want to have a mock-up. Maybe we need to fill out an outage notification form. Maybe there's a stakeholder demo required or a video walkthrough. But there's different qualities that we can just click and add to a particular story so that we know down the road these need to be included as part of completing the story. And then if we make the assumption that we filled it out correctly, the description's all done, and it's been developed just the way we wanted, how do we test it? So this the test contains requirements that have to be met for the team in order for the story to be completed. So this can be very handy that as someone's developing a particular feature or story, if they know how it's going to be tested, it just makes the definition that much more clear about what needs to get done correct to make sure it meets everyone's satisfaction. Now you'll see that as I'm logged into the system, I also see anyone else that's logged into looking at the same item. So here, John is looking at this item as well, and I see his username in the title bar here. Now, for a particular story, let's choose load project data as an example. So I'm going to put in some detail here, and let's say the load project data we want to create a process to copy data from one SQL table to another. The story is considered complete once a process is available to copy the data from one table to another. So that's not a lot of description, and typically it can be typical of a story. We don't have a lot to go with at the very beginning, but at this point we just want to estimate this particular story. So there's a tool here called Planning Poker. So as I open Planning Poker, I see there's a number of people that could estimate this thing. I see a number of cards that are available here. For purposes of our estimation, let's assume these cards represent days. So, John, if you were responsible for completing this story, click on a card, and don't tell me, but click on a card that represents how many days you think it would take you. Good. So I see John's made his card selection. I'm going to make a selection of my own. I see we both made selections. If there's only 2 of us on the call right now, but there could be any number of people participating in this. I'm going to click Show Votes, and I see I think it would take 1 day. John thinks it would take 3. So this is the value in this tool is it helps us facilitate conversation. So now would be the right time. I would ask John, okay, well, why do you think it's 3? He would ask me, why do I think it's 1? And we would discuss back and forth. There's probably pieces that are unknown. So we'll add assumptions, we'll add clarifications, we'll flesh out the story so that we're both comfortable with the right estimate. Now it's important that we don't say the numbers until we show the votes, because we don't want them to be biased. If I were to say, I think I'm going to put 1, that would unfairly influence John's estimate here. John may say, well, okay, I think it would be 1, and he'll just select 1 without having the conversation, because there could be some valuable pieces that come out of that conversation to make sure we're reducing risk across the project.
So just to clarify too, this is not, say if we're both working on the project, this is not each of our portions, this is the total, and we're just trying to make sure we have a complete understanding of what needs to be done and how long it's going to take for the whole project.
That's right.
Or the whole section of the project.
That's a very good point. So the numbers here represent, I'll try and remember the wording of the question, but if I were responsible for doing this whole feature and I had nothing else to do, how long would it take me? So we think about it, if individually, if I were responsible for doing this whole thing and I had no help from anybody else, how long would it take? So you could also think about it that way, John, that across the team, how much effort would it take us in total effort hours, total effort days. So I'm going to close the poker here. I'll put an estimate of 3 days. I notice that my estimation icon disappears because now it's been estimated. And once it's been estimated, we could pull this into a sprint. So I'm going to jump around a bit. I'm going to go over to collaboration and the story template wiki. So this has a long list of all the different sections you could put into a story to make it clear on what's necessary. Not all of these are required all the time, but this is meant as a starting point. So folks could copy this, paste it into a story, and then start fleshing out the pieces that are relevant for that particular story. As we build up the list of stories, some are going to be more important than others. The ones that are more important, we drag and move to the top. The ones that are less important, we move to the bottom. Only the product owner can change these priorities. And we can only pull stories into a sprint once they've been estimated. So now that we're looking at the screen, let's go through the tabs one more time. So at the top we have the dashboard. This is our sprint burn down chart. We'll come back to this as well because there's some other features here. When we're in a sprint, we see this as the whiteboard. So these are stories that have been pulled into a sprint. If I click on the top, I can see any details from the story. I can see the original estimate that's there, but that estimate we can't change anyhow. That's just an estimate. Now, everyone individually on the team can come in here and create tasks. So if I'm going to be sending out the meeting invite for something, I can just say, I come in here and create a task for that. I can claim it, and I can mark it done. Now let's say that I want to reopen it because I have something else. I can reopen it. I can also create an impediment. By creating an impediment, I say maybe no Outlook isn't working. So maybe my Outlook isn't working right now, and that's blocking me from doing this. So this is listed here on our impediment list. If I go back to our sprint, you'll see this red icon here. So this tells me that this is blocked by impediment 17, Outlook isn't working. So everyone has visibility into the fact that I'm blocked on this particular task because Outlook's not working. If they're available or they know how to help, they can reach out to me and say, hey, I think I can help. And then once that's done, I just take off that impediment. The icon changes. I can add comments here. Say, John helped me with impediment 17, and my Outlook is working now. Now notice this is a short form there, IMP 17. When I click finish, that's actually a link now. So there's a variety of different links that work within Kunagi. So I could say STO64 would link me to anything to do with story 64. I could say ISS1 would link me to anything around issue number 1. I could say BLG1 would link me to blog 1. So when I click apply, notice how there's all these links that are available here. If I click this particular link, it zooms right to that particular impediment. If I zoom to a story, it goes to the details of that story, which is right here. If I go to ISS1, it goes right to that particular issue. In this case, it's a closed issue from history. That's fine. All the data is still available with the detail. Blog 1, it zooms right to that blog entry. And this particular blog entry, you see there's also file references. So FLE4, FLE3 references files that can be downloaded.
So are these references specific to this sprint? So you would repeat those issue numbers, etc., in a different sprint?
Good question. So all of these links are global, or pardon me, I guess project specific. So for stuff like, once we get to the end of this sprint, these links will still work. They'll still go to the right place, but the numbers will continue to increase.
Okay.
So I've marked ideally, when we get to the end of a sprint, we see all the tasks for a particular story are done. We'll see that the story itself has a green check mark telling us that all tasks are done. Now, this tells us the team thinks the story is completed. As product owner, I have to decide whether to accept the story or reject the story. Accept is if the story is implemented sufficiently, and reject if the story is fixed insufficient, and I provide a comment why I reject this. So this is another important task for the product owner, to be accepting stories as they're completed, because it's not enough for the development team to say, I think this is done. It's not done until the product owner says, yep, I looked at it, it meets my criteria, I now accept this story. And then they have an opportunity, they click accept, and you'll see a thumbs up icon. Similarly, if it was rejected, you'd see a thumbs down icon with a comment. Whenever we're wondering what stories are in a particular sprint, there's a sprint backlog. So here this gives us a list of all the stories in the current sprint. We see that the Agile Training one has been accepted. Our load balance sheet data story is still there. It's not complete yet. And then we have another story here that's available along with some details of the sprint telling us when it began, when it ends, and any notes. We can also download this as a PDF. So if this particular project is a sub-project of something larger, a lot of these sprint details can always be downloaded as a PDF to be submitted as status updates for other people. So we've looked at the dashboard, we've looked at the whiteboard, we've looked at the sprint backlog, we've looked at the product backlog. Is there a list of stories or what we need to get done? Qualities are just items that can be tagged in a particular story as something that we need to make sure that we include. Here's our issues list. Now the issues list is an important piece for capturing feedback. Whenever anyone on the team is welcome to put in an issue, and as the Scrum Master, it's up to the Scrum Master to decide whether these things are ideas or bugs, or they can just be closed. So I can put in a new issue, I can say it's related to something else, put in whatever detail I want, and then I can either accept this as an idea, a bug, or close it. It's not up to the whole team to decide what's a bug and what isn't. The team is really focused on fixing bugs. So these are the list of bugs that the Scrum Master has decided are really bugs. For these items, anyone on the team can come in and claim them, mark them as fixed, convert them to a story if necessary, or move them back to the inbox. Maybe this is something that needs more clarification, or it needs to be reviewed again, or we can just close it. For ideas are typically things that maybe someone's going through testing, or they're reviewing the tool, and they say, you know what, it works the way I want, it works the way we asked, but there's a way we can make this a lot better and more friendly. So by putting in ideas, we can make sure we convert them to stories, and they get slotted into future sprints to make sure the tool is always improving.
So I guess another term for an idea would be a feature request?
Yes. Yeah. Feature request, usually a change request, anything that we would like to improve the system to make it better. And then releases. Releases, again, are groups of sprints. So here, when I look at a particular release, this is REL1, this is release 1. I see that it's made up of 2 sprints. So I just select which sprints are part of this release. And then right away, I have links to more detail of the sprint, links to each of the stories in the sprint, and link to all the fixed bugs as part of that sprint. So this can be handy for providing a full release documentation of anything that was completed in that as part of that release, or it's being released to production. So this is available automatically. All you need to do is just select which sprints are part of this release. And I mentioned dates before. So this release has a date here. So this is saying this is a release date of May 31st, 2013. That's when this release is going to go out. And this is what, well, it went out, this is what it would have that had in it. Blogs. Again, the blogs are just an area for keeping notes. You can link by typing BLG1 anywhere. I could create a link right to this blog that's available. Going to the project tab, again, we see our list of impediments. Here's our list of risks. We want to know what is it, there's a description of it, what's the possible impact, what's the probability of it. That defines our priority by giving this priority matrix that you'll see here in the comment. And then it has an opportunity here for us to put in, well, what's our impact mitigation or probability mitigation? So impact is how do we, if this were to happen, how do we reduce the impact of it? And what can we do to reduce the likelihood of this is the probability mitigation. And again, you see it, anytime you see a download as PDF link, it takes anything available in that section and packages up as a PDF for anyone that may need it. A journal, you'll see this is just a running list of actions that have happened across the system. The next sprint piece, this is where we look at the details of the current sprint as well as the next one. So it helps us plan out, well, the next sprint that we want, when should it begin, how long should it go, when should it end, are there any notes around the planning? And the two most important pieces to me are, well, what do we call this thing and what's the goal? Because we want to have a clear goal for each of these sprints. Yes, we're about completing stories in the sprint, but it's nice to have a goal that overarches these stories. So the next sprint piece is really looking forward, and the sprint history is looking back. So for any of the prior sprints, we see the same detail we would have for that. So we can always look back and see, well, what happened on prior sprints. If I want to look at a particular story, I can see the details of it, right down to the tasks that were completed, and if there are any comments on those tasks or the story, it's all available here as we move forward. From a collaboration perspective, we see that Wiki has the story template. A good place to start is the story template. The forum gives a listing of comments that have been entered. The calendar piece tells us when sprint end, when sprints end and begin, as well as anyone can come in here and create an event for vacation or out of office time, just letting folks know they'll be unavailable. This is just a nice respectful piece to make sure that we're not overcommitting people, and just helps transparency and clarity across the team. The file repository is a running list of any files that have been uploaded anywhere in the system. So maybe if we think, I know I uploaded a file somewhere, I'm not sure where it was, looking at the file repository will be a quick way of finding that particular file. And then if you ever need to link to it, FLE and then the number, just typing that in any comment or any text field anywhere will create a link to these particular items. The courtroom piece itself is a listing of all the users in the system, and this is where we track tardiness, and we track some kind of punitive pieces for the project. If we have someone who's continually late for meetings or not showing up or creating, really not carrying their weight, we'll track that kind of thing. And it's not something that we don't want to have to do this, but it brings visibility to that kind of behavior that we want to discourage. And then settings, for personal settings, this one here, this receive emails on journal events by yes or no. If you choose yes, you'll get an email anytime something changes in the system, and you can just change how you want your name to appear in different pieces like that. So now going back to the dashboard, as we pulled in that particular, we created a new task. You see this, something was created and came back down. We're still tracking below the line, which is good news. On this dashboard, we see our list of open impediments, high priority risks, latest events, and we see what any stories or issues the team is working on right now, as well as a listing of all the different team members that are available in this project. So I hope this has been a helpful video, and if you have any comments, please feel free to enter them below.